Great, thanks. So from the age of 19, I've practiced Buddhism, and Nichiren Buddhism, for 39 years now. So it's been a core part of my life for many, many years. It's interesting that you're doing this sharing in this format, Claire, because about 8 or 9 years ago, I used to run the openmindtherapist.com. I still do it. It's a professional website for colleagues, but I used to do these weekly teleseminars. It was all audio at the time. It was people had to dial in and they had to listen, and we audio recorded it and put it up. Technology has come on such a long way since then. You know, we're all happy to meet each other on Zoom, so that's great. So going over to, let me start sharing, and I've also got another website which is my one-to-one openmindtherapy.co.uk. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me share it first. Where is it? Here it is. Share. Can you see that, everyone? Yeah. Let me just get it onto slideshow. Come on. From the beginning. Right. Okay. It's called Get Diggin It, How to Change the World, but we do that because growing food is a radical act of protest. And at the moment, this couldn't be more relevant to where we are, because as you probably, as spiritual and enlightened beings, you understand the importance of us coming together in community and building the world that we want. And growing food is one of the most radical ways to start building the world that we want. And especially in these times at the moment, we have got a reason to be particularly concerned about where our food comes from, what's in it, and if there will be continued supply of it. So that's why I believe it is so important right now to grow food. However, the story of Get Diggin It, which is a little company I put together about 4.5 years ago in Durmow, starts in Kashmir. In the summer of 2016, I was at a Mind Body Spirit fair, and I walked up to the stand where the man on the stand was selling mandalas, beautiful chakra, 7 chakra mandalas. And I was intrigued, and I stopped, and there was a story on the board, and I started talking to him. And he said, "We're doing this. This is my mother. She embroiders these beautiful mandalas, and she gets the women of the town." Sorry, I can't even remember the name of the capital. It will come back to me in a minute. So she gets all of the women locally to do these mandalas. She sends them over to the UK. Her son, Shah, who I subsequently got to know, then goes to all the Mind Body Spirit fairs, and he sells them on her behalf, takes a small cut and sends the money back to Kashmir. And in that way, the Kashmiri women have formed a cooperative and empowered themselves to be able to make a difference in their small community. I was absolutely inspired, and I was fascinated, listening very closely to what he said. And he then told me that his family, his wife, who's English, had decided that they would get into permaculture, because the only way they felt they could help Kashmir, because for those of you that don't know, it was occupied by the Indian military and the Indian forces, where the line of partition between India and Pakistan was right through the middle of Kashmir. It's a bit like Berlin was once scarred down the middle by east and west, and even the north and south of Ireland was, scarred down the middle with the border. So despite the fact they had tried to help, all of their attempts to help had been dashed, because the Indian military had seen them as political, and they didn't want any external people seeing what was going on in Kashmir and raising awareness in the West. So the only way they felt they could get any sort of on-the-ground help in Kashmir was to empower the local people. So they did a permaculture course, and they then took this permaculture to Kashmir. And Shah, at the top of his head, just said, "Would you like to come?" Now I was completely like, I'd only met him about 20 minutes before, knowing that I was a therapist, and I did grow vegetables at the time, and still do, obviously. And I said, "Well, yes, I would love to come on your permaculture trip, but do you really mean it?" I couldn't believe he meant it. He said, "I'm absolutely serious." He said, "Give me your email and I will get in touch." So long story short, the ensuing 6 weeks were full of those amazing coincidences where one thing falls into place after another, and by mid-September we were on a plane to Kashmir. Just before we left for Kashmir, about 3 weeks before, there was a shooting in Kashmir. One of the local boys from the university had a following, young man, and he was very sort of, let's Kashmir for Kashmiris. The Indian military shot him and called him an insurgent, and the students came out on the streets and caused uproar. As a result, the military came in and shot them in the face and blinded many young men. And in the wake of this, we turned up in Kashmir. And with the whole town was under curfew, and we were sort of escorted to his parents' home. We had to skulk around the town, trying to find ways of getting to the meetings that had been set up by Shah, his wife, and another lady that was with us, who was a permaculture teacher. My role there was the trauma resolution. So I was there to observe and understand what traumatized people and how to empower them. But as you can see from this picture, this was taken on Dal Lake, which is in the center of the capital of Kashmir on the Indian side. And it is the most beautiful setting, absolutely beautiful. And these poor people, because of the continued troubles in Kashmir, their tourist industries have been completely decimated. And seeing a few white people in the middle of Kashmir, they were literally boating towards us in their dozens, trying to sell us everything. So it was really sweet. It was just heartbreaking to know that these people have been locked down, they've been put in curfew because the Indian military could not tolerate anyone whipping up any pro-Kashmiri sentiment. So that's how it started. Let me see if I can talk about this. So we were there looking at ways of empowering people to grow food, and the way we wanted to empower people was to grow vegetables as much as possible, and to empower people to understand how resources are being wasted by being chucked in the lake. So there's a lot of human feces just literally chucked in the lake. A lot of cow manure along the roadways because the cows run wild on the street. So there were lots of resources that permaculture, which comes from Australia. A guy called Bill Mollison looked at systems of permanent agriculture, which means agriculture that does not strip the land of its goodness, but actually works harmoniously with the resources and the land all around it. So that was the idea of permaculture. And in this environment where there aren't those fertilizers available, and seeds are something you have to save, you don't buy them from shop. How do you empower local people to feed themselves, to build small communities of interested people that want to come together to grow vegetables? And how do you get this trade system going between houses so that everyone is fed? Obviously, this was the most beautiful floating vegetable market. This was about 5 o'clock in the morning at sunrise. We were middle of September, and we just watched how early morning all of these farmers here are very small holdings, and they would bring their veg to market, and it was at market that they would distribute it and sell it to each other. And then these particular people would then there would be shops owners and tradesmen here buying what they needed and taking them back to their small outlets wherever they were. And it was absolutely stunning. It was a sheer privilege to be at this beautiful tradition of the floating vegetable market, which just doesn't happen, obviously, anywhere else that I've ever been to before. So moving on to the next one, there was an issue with food distribution. This charity here, if you can see the leaflet on the left, Our Fruit. This was a charitable organisation run by a man who had set up his organisation within the grounds of the hospital. He had a few vans and he had these sacks of food. And for the people whose eyes had been shot out, and there were, at the time I was there were at least 50, 60 young men who had no eyes or one eye. He was giving them, delivering and distributing food to them because they literally had no other way of living apart from the vegetables that they had that were distributed and sold from the veg growers along the side of Dal Lake. What happened with his outfit, we went to see him the first time. We saw what was going on. He was a holy man, a Muslim man, and he explained to us what was happening. The second time we were due to go and see him, he rang and said, please don't come. The military are here, they've confiscated our vans because they have no tax. Most vehicles in Kashmir do not have tax. So it was just a deliberate provocation to cause the local people to not be able to be served and supported by this amazing charity. So I just want you to consider, food is one way the military uses to subdue and subjugate people. And if they can stop the distribution of food, then they can starve the people and get them to do whatever they want. I'm sorry to say it, but this is exactly what was happening in Kashmir. So this is our team. We were full of the joys of spring and hoping that we could make a difference. So on the left is me, next to me is Victoria, she's our permaculture teacher. Next to Victoria is Amber, and next to Amber is Shah. And Shah is the local man. They live in England, but obviously he is from Kashmir. This was one of the farms on the edge of the lake. Srinagar, that's the name of the capital. Let me write it down in case I forget again. Srinagar. So we're in Srinagar. And Srinagar has a massive lake called Dal Lake. It's one of the most beautiful lakes I've ever seen, right in the deep crevice of the valley. And on Dal Lake, there are small holdings all the way around Dal Lake. And this is just a sample of some of the food that would be available for sale on the edge of the lake. They were allowed to trade during curfew, but obviously people had to go to the vegetable stalls and go straight home. So you can understand, this, for me, this was just a sign of things to come. The most important thing about what was going on at Srinagar was that there was no internet. We could not communicate with people outside of the country. There was no telephone. Sometimes they would allow, all of the lines would go up and they'd allow people to phone out, but not to phone in. And other times they would only allow incoming calls and not outgoing calls. And all internet was closed down and they were literally isolated from the world. And this scared me immensely, to think that a government has the power to isolate a people and then subjugate them to this kind of treatment. So that was very, very scary. So having got home from that experience, it was so mind-blowing from the sense of really witnessing people's suffering. When we were in the home of Shah and his family, I was very honoured to be embraced by the family, along with Victoria, because Muslim families are very private and they don't open their homes to anyone. But we were embraced and I was very honoured that they'd allowed us in. And as a result, obviously, I could see the stresses and the tinderbox of emotions that was going on in that household. And in related households, and there were clashes and there was arguments, but not because anyone was being particularly nasty or unkind, but because they were literally like prisoners in their own homes. So when I got home in Durmow, I remember sat at this table. I have a bookshelf just across the way from me here. And I remember just sat here thinking, having done much research over many years and understanding what has never been reported in mainstream media, but that I'd spent many years researching and understanding about the world, that back here in Durmow, we were hooked up to life support. And what I mean by life support is Tesco's just down the road, I can buy anything. I can go to the doctor, I'm hooked up to life support, I'm hooked up to the grid, so I've always got power. I'm hooked up to various institutions, I'm hooked up to the council, and basically my life isn't mine. It is I've been trained to depend on others and other systems and other things around me. And it suddenly dawned on me very, very starkly that people here, if anything were to happen, simply would not know what to do. And it was when I got back, I'd been threatening to get into this garden for some time. This garden runs along the back of my house. So my house is, if you're looking at the garden, it's to the right and it's towards the camera. And there are 3 gardens that run across the back on the right, and this one is a long garden that runs across the back of these other 3. And for many years, or 3 years or so, though I have allotments, I thought, I'm going to get into this garden and I'm going to start growing vegetables. They'd never taken an interest in it. Even this picture shows that I've already massacred a garden load of brambles and nettles, and took it down to grass, as you can see there. But I just thought, I need to teach people how to grow food. I need to teach people how to get back to nature. I need to teach people that food does not come in a plastic package from Tesco. It actually comes in season from the ground and the earth that we build when we grow food. You build the soil, and the soil rewards you when you build it. So here I was with this garden thinking, bloody hell, I've got a massive project in my hands, but I'm going to go for it. So let me see what the next slide says. So at that time I was thinking, okay, I'm going to grow in other people's gardens. Let me see what other people are doing. Is this happening anywhere else? And I discovered these 6 very similar networks. And I'll go through them one by one briefly. On the top left, the black guy with the standing there with his arm on a trowel, whatever. This is a guy called the Guerrilla Gardener. He calls himself the Guerrilla Gardener. Can't remember his name at the minute. It's gone out of my head. But what he did was he started in his town in Chicago. He started growing on the grass verges, and he started growing vegetables because in his very poor area of town, the only shops there were near him were what they call liquor stores. So literally just nuts and peanuts and packaged foods. There was nothing fresh at all. And to get to anywhere fresh was a huge drive away. And many people were very isolated and locked away in these small communities where he was in Chicago. And he thought, I'm going to grow on the verges. So he started growing. The local council, whatever they're called, municipal councils, didn't like that. So they took him to court and he won. And he said, how dare you, effectively, I'm going to continue growing. And as a result, he calls himself the Gangster Gardener, that's his name. You can find him on YouTube. If you just put in a Gangster Gardener, really cool dude. He's probably late 50s, early 60s, and he's done an awful lot for the promotion of vegetable growing. He has people walk past the places that he's planted up and look longingly at the food he's planted, and he says to them, take it, it's for you, it's just for you. And they're absolutely sort of full of emotion and at his generosity, and it's just a tremendous thing for him to do. At the bottom left, you've got Incredible Edible. Now this is an organisation up in Todmorden in Yorkshire, and they decided one day about 10 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago, to start growing food in public spaces. and they turned their town into an edible food forest. So everywhere you go, you can collect and pick lettuces, all kinds of stuff that they plant in these public places. They have done a tremendous amount of work to promote people growing food in public places, and therefore growing them in their own homes, towns, in a back garden, so on and so forth. They've even done something where they did an egg laying map of Tomadan, where anyone who had eggs for sale, they drew a map, and on the map they would cite where all of these little tiny, I've got 3 chickens. My chickens in the summer produce much more than I can possibly eat. So if I've got a couple of boxes of eggs out the front every other day, it would be put on the map. And what this did was it drew tourism to Tomadan, and the tourists started walking the egg route. And as a result, they started to see the vegetables planted in the public spaces. And it was just an incredible edible experiment, which has just been tremendous. In the top of the middle up there is a guy called Curtis Stone, and he's in Canada, and he's a most amazing man. He's been growing food about 10 years himself. He said he wanted to get into growing food because he realized he was doing nothing useful. And though he's a musician, he didn't feel that was very valuable. So what he did was, in Canada, they have these massive gardens, they call them yards, obviously. And he just approached various people with large gardens and said, how would you feel about, allowing me to have the gardens, and I will give you a cut of what I grow in it. I will sell it, and I will become, and I will use your land, and you will get some income out of it, and so will I. So he's called the urban farmer. He had about an acre between about 3 or 4 properties, and he just produced phenomenal stuff. I followed him because he produces very fast, very quick. You can do it in one season. You can get absolutely a massive amount of food, and I'm going to show, hopefully I've got some pictures, I can't remember now, of the food that came out of this garden in the first season. So amazing guy. He also talks about liberty on the land. So he's talking about common law with reference to the land and what is permitted under common law. Nobody can stop you growing food for your family or for your neighbours. According to common law, it is your right, and he does a lot of work on that, which is tremendous. He's called the urban farmer, if I didn't mention that. Amazing guy. So at the bottom here, you've got Rob Hopkins' The Transition Handbook. Now, you may well have heard of Totnes, Tomadan, Brixton, and various other towns in the UK that are called transition towns. And as you can see, it says from oil dependency to local resilience. So transition towns are really trying to move away from the system. They're trying to move away from the dependency on oil and fossil fuels to dependency on local resilience, which means making their own energy, growing their own food, designing their own clothes, etc., etc. So the Transition Handbook is just literally a roadmap to bring people back to what is meaningful in small communities and how they can unhook from this fossil fuel industry, which isn't necessarily in itself a problem, i.e. using fossil fuels. What the problem is being hooked up to a system whereby you can be exploited when the oil industry decides to cut you off or decides to raise its prices, etc., etc. I don't know if any of you have heard, but they are talking about blackouts and fuel shortages in the coming weeks and months due to this, international situation we're all tolerating at the moment. At the bottom here, you have an organisation called Fleet Farming. Very briefly, they're an organisation in America. They enlist the help of all kinds of local people. They grow in other people's gardens, and they do exactly what Curtis Stone does, but Curtis does it in a very commercial way, whereas these people do it in a non-commercial way. They do it just to feed and share amongst each other. Imagine that growing food is like printing money. It is free, yeah? So it does actually give you something that you can't buy. You can't buy the quality of food that you get when you grow your own. You cannot buy that. And what's more is you don't pay anything for it. And what I want to show you is how you can grow food for nothing. I mean, cost-wise. And the Pesticide Action Network is from an organisation called Growing Together. And again, very small, but still significant. They are in Westcliff-on-Sea in Essex. I didn't know they were there until I started researching. And we went to visit them one day. They have a very small outfit, but it's really mental health, and a lot of people go and use the services for mental health. So imagine my surprise when I'd had this, I thought, independent brainstorm to grow food in other people's gardens and on public spaces, and all of a sudden I find half a dozen people doing it already, which was great, because at least it meant I wasn't a complete freak, and that I, was able to be supported by other people doing similar things. So Get Diggin It was a community interest company, or is a community interest company, and I want to go through briefly some of our foundational principles. Number one is health and well-being. As you know, there's been nothing more important in this last year than getting outside and actually communing with nature, and actually getting fresh air in your lungs, and making sure that your health is supported by your own attempts to support it, which means eating really healthy food, drinking plenty of clean water, no fluoride, no chlorine, which you can get by either distilling, I distill mine, or you can get a Berkey filter that takes most of it out. So, and supporting your immune system. We all know how to support our immune system. Anybody who's in health and well-being knows that things like colloidal silver kills over 500 known pathogens. It's more effective than any antibiotic. I make my own colloidal silver. Anyone knows that if you've got high quality wild oregano oil, if you're in members of doTERRA, you'll know that oregano oil is a very powerful antiseptic, antiviral antibiotic. The same with melaleuca, I think it's called. And sage. I've got a sage garden, sage plant in the front garden, and there's an old wives' tale, if you like, that says if you have sage in your garden, you will never be ill. So I take strips of sage, I bind them together, and I smudge my home, because it just literally just gets rid of all the negative energy and it cleanses your home. So there are so many ways of improving your health and well-being. We all know that mental well-being is as important as physical. So calm, empowered, resilient, meditation, mindfulness. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. So I'm just kind of going through our foundational principle and why it's so important for us to do what we're doing. The next one was treading lightly on the land, because the story we are being told constantly is that there is not enough food to feed all of us evil hordes that are on this planet, and that they have to use Monsanto and genetically modified food to feed the billions of people on the planet. This is a lie. It's an absolute lie. These people do not tread lightly on the land. They destroy the land. They destroy the microbiome. They fill it with poisons and toxins, and then they expect healthy food to grow from it that has been genetically modified. This is anti-life. It is not sustainable, and they know it. So while they say there's too many people on the planet, we can't support them all, this is a complete lie. Because if the government brought organic farms into activity, which they're never going to do because it's not on their agenda, but let's just imagine for one mad moment that our government actually cared. If they brought farms, organic farms, to promoted it and inspired people to grow food organically locally, and to use permaculture principles, treading lightly on the land and actually building soils instead of stripping soils, there would be ample food for everyone. So treading lightly on the land is a permaculture principle of using local resources that other people don't want: wood chips, sawdust, leaves, grass cuttings, municipal grass cuttings. I mean, the amount of grass cuttings that the council has to get rid of every year. We can use all of these resources, build soils, and actually tread lightly on the land and have abundance like you would never believe. And finally, of course, something we are learning very, very much now, albeit we've been forced to learn it, is the importance of community, the importance of people coming together for each other, not for the big Tesco stores or the big corporations buying from Amazon and then shipping it by drone to your front door, but the local community and all of the products and value that build local community, networking, bringing food home to the front door, sharing what you've cooked and preserved. You don't even have to charge any money for it. You just have to barter and trade. This is freedom and independence that the government cannot tax. So this is why, this is a foundational principle of Get Diggin It. So, so that's when we were registered, even though I was doing it for 2 years up to that point, and then the first grant money arrives. So this is just a testimonial from an older lady. She was a German lady that's named Trouty. It's always difficult to use her name without people saying, no, she can't be called Trouty. But she is. Her name's Warthold. I've got a degree in German. So her name's Warthold, but they shorten it to Trouty. But anyway, Trouty had been with me for at least 2 years. I gave a talk and she just really was keen. Germany is very, very advanced in their idea of community building. So she was very inspired and quite an alternative character herself in many ways. Since lockdown, she's been absolutely terrified of the virus, which has been tragic because I don't think she has any reason to be afraid. But she has been, so I've seen very little of her in the last year. So this is what she said. I'll read it out. I originally heard about Get Diggin It at a monthly U3A meeting where Jenny gave a talk. I'd only recently moved to Durmow and thought joining would be a good way to meet more people. I also like the idea of community gardening. Being part of Get Diggin It means I have the satisfaction of having homegrown vegetables without the responsibility of having to start to decide what to plant, to grow, how and when. When I first joined, I did not really know what to expect and certainly did not expect to go home with a rucksack full of vegetables after a session. I enjoy the work, getting my hands dirty and learning more about no-dig gardening. I certainly look at it as a long-term involvement. At the moment, I just do one morning a week, but I would not mind doing more on occasion as and when necessary. So Trouty really did get so much out of it. She was devastated when lockdown came because she was too scared to come out. And she felt she'd lost a really important connection in the community. And especially when I didn't give her monkeys, I was absolutely fine with it, with being outside. But she wasn't. So bless her. What's the next screen? Okay. So this is the garden at the back of my house. I wanted to show you here some of the resources that people throw away and think, oh, it's just rubbish. Okay, this is not rubbish. This is really valuable resources. And if you look at the far left picture there, that silver foil is just takeaway Indian trays cut up and stitched onto a string. And it's on the ground there, but I had it strung up over the what do the birds eat? I can't remember now. I had them strung up. I think it might have been over the cauliflowers or whatever it was I was growing that year, as a bird deterrent, because they see the glint of light from the aluminium, and it also rustles and makes a noise in the wind, so it just scares them off. So imagine, it's nothing. In the middle picture at the top here, you've got a mushroom punnet, and those are tomatoes growing in the mushroom punnet. So you can see, you don't need to go to the stores to buy those trays to grow anything in. You've got everything you need. The next picture along from that is just a picture of wood chip. This I just get from local tree surgeons who are getting rid of stuff, and I use it as a path. So I put it down as a path. Last year I experimented It's called the Back to Eden method of gardening. But last year I experimented with putting wood chips around my growing plants, because it was such a dry year last year that the plants just die in the soil if it's too dry. When you put wood chips around them, the moisture is retained to such an extent that you would think you would just watered it. So it's if we're going to have water shortages, this is just absolutely essential ways of gardening. On the right here, this wooden structure, this was literally some wood that I got from down the road. Somebody was throwing it out. The trellis work on the top was literally an old trellis that fell off the back fence, and I just used it as a roof. I covered it in plastic from Travis Perkins' waste bin, where they strip the plastic from the pallet, and just covered it in that. The structure, I designed the structure, my partner built it, and since then it's had lots of different additions to it, so it doesn't look like that anymore. It's still there, but it's got other bits added onto it. Various volunteers and people that have stayed with me from workaway.info have come and they've added bits to it, and it's just the most amazing little greenhouse. At the bottom there you've got a paint bucket, and you've got a brick in the foreground. So the paint bucket, you find them on skips. Anywhere you go, you'll find a paint bucket. Take it. It's fantastic to put plants in. Just put a few holes in the bottom. You can put plants in. You can paint it. You can decorate it. Stick it in your patio if you want. The point being is, it's free. You don't have to go and buy an expensive pot for 20 quid when you've got something that could actually be a project for your kids or your grandkids. They could get the pot. You could get them some acrylic paint. They can paint it and they can design it, and it's just a beautiful thing to do. And then lastly, you can just see a little lettuce there sticking out of I think that's a cottage cheese pot. The blue sort of tray on the left is one of those trays from the children's drawers at school, one of those play trays. And a school was getting rid of a load, so I just took them. And basically, at the back there, you've even got some normal pots. Wow. What you can do with normal pots is literally just ask your neighbours if you've got any pots you don't want. Put it on Facebook. Has anyone got a few pots? I'm needing to plant some stuff up. People are always throwing them away. This is criminal. Don't throw this stuff away. Let's redistribute it. Let's grow stuff in it. So yeah, community building. Okay, this was one event that we had at the allotment. So this was how we incorporated, what were we doing? We were doing allotment tidy up, and we had Steph the chef. You can see her at top right with her red collar on. Steph the chef, bless, she used to be the chef at Tesco's in Durmow for the staff, and she saw what I was doing and she got in touch with me and said, Jenny, I've got to join in, I love it. She's from the north originally, so somehow I just think sometimes the northerners are just so much more sociable and so much more community minded than we are down here. It was a bit of a shock. I used to live up in Liverpool, and even though they often say, what do you call a scouser in a suit, the accused, there was still a sort of a sense of community up there that didn't really exist down here. I won't name names, but 3 or 4 of these are clients of mine that I'd met through my practice and wanted to take part. And you can see people are happy. We were wheelbarrowing up and down. There's me laying there in my yellow t-shirt on a heap of dung, horse manure, like a pig in muck, And to do the community building, I've knocked on so many doors. I've knocked on the local gas canister supply man and said, could you donate a gas canister? I've been to Homebase, B&Q, all of these places said, can you donate some tools? The amount of, I've done public talks galore, just on trying to inspire and bring people together to start really thinking about how do we build community? How do we grow for each other and with each other? This shed was also donated. I went on to next door. This was 3 or 4 years ago, And I said to the people on next door, has anyone got an old shed? I need one down the allotment for Get Diggin It. And I told them what the Get Diggin It was. The next thing, the local councillor came on. He said, I've got some money that I need to donate to a charitable organisation. Can I give you the money for a shed? I said, wow, yes, please. So he said, well, just tell me what you need and we'll do it. So I told him what I wanted. He said, no problem. It cost about 600 quid. It's the best quality shed you can buy. And the community day was it was quite a big event. We had about 20 people in all, and the children got involved. They were painting the strips. The young woman on the right, she's only about 14. She was painting. We had children, babies, you know, like 3 and 4 years of age, painting. And basically, we just transformed the shed. And the reason, obviously, we wanted to just make it really special and different for us. But also, when volunteers come onto the plot and you say to them, just find the stripy shed, then there's no other shed like it. So so there you go. So you can see how we started the logo on the front door, and then the logo finished on the right. That was something I just finished off because the kids, you know, they weren't going to get that done properly. It was a big job, bless them. But anyway, so that was the shed, and this is the back garden. So this was the following year. So I got home in October 2016. I started getting all of the rubbish out of the garden. And the following year was 2017. We had a good crop that year, but the following year, which is this year, it did amazing. As you can see, it was just a beautiful garden full of abundance. This soil is not clay. This is 2 years of compost and lasagna bedding. I talk about lasagna bedding in this course that I'm teaching on a Friday at the moment. So lasagna bed is where you actually build soil from scratch on top of soil that is absolutely impossible to work with. So you lay cardboard and then you lay various layers of what's called carbons and nitrogen. So carbons are dead organic matter like leaf, straw, hay, sawdust, newspaper, cardboard, and nitrogens are grass clippings, food waste, weeds, horse manure, and so on and so forth. And what you do is you lay them in layers, alternating layers. And on the very top, what I did on these particular beds was 2 years running, I just laid very well rotted horse manure on the top. And then if you do that in the autumn or the spring, very early spring, January, it's cold in January, but either November or January, if you do that in those 2 months, you still have enough time for the beds to settle in so that they're ready for sowing later in the spring, probably end of March. And this is what we've got here. At the forefront, you can see sunflowers. Right down the bottom at the front left, you can just see strawberries poking their heads up. There's beans at the back on poles. So much I can't even tell you, so much there. But that's what you can achieve in a garden that is about 25 foot long and about 13 foot wide. So it's quite a small space. In terms of meters, we're looking at maybe 4.5 meters long, maybe a bit more than that, maybe 5.5 meters long and maybe 3 wide. So it's quite a small space. You can grow so much in an even smaller space than that, which I do talk a little bit about on the course that I'm running on a Friday. So where does Get Diggin It fit into the plan to save the world? How do we save the world? Okay, localization of food improves the local economy and the local environment. So we are the ones we have been waiting for. No one else is going to save us. We have to do it. So if we bring our our food, forget the phone. If we bring our food to our own back door or to our neighbour's back door, because if your neighbour has a garden that they don't use at all and they wouldn't mind you going in there a couple of times you know, maybe half a dozen times a week to grow stuff in it, then why not? So localization of food is absolutely essential. We do not want to be dependent on big ag and on Monsanto and genetically modified seeds, etc., etc. One of the videos, let me just show you, hold on a moment. Here it is. I highly recommend that you have a look at this video. I bought a hard copy, a DVD, because it was such an important purchase for me. I've played it many times, I've played it to groups, and I've played it just to watch. But Helena Norbert Hodge, who is the author of this video, talks about the localization of food as a solution to globalization. So as a solution to trashing the soil and trashing the environment by using big ag. And I highly recommend watching it. So localization of food is a solution to food waste and food inequality, because once you've grown something, there's no way you're going to waste it, right? You're going to give it to your neighbors, you're going to give it to friends, or you're going to eat it, because you put so much effort into it. You realize that once you've grown something, you are not going to throw it away. You know, and you'll even cut up the most gnarly looking potato with a tiny little bit of edible potato in the middle because you grew it. And this is just amazing. And food inequality is where poor people line up at food banks thinking they're poor, but actually if they have a garden, they're the most rich people in the world. So all they have to do is get into their gardens and start growing food, start building communities, start supporting each other and looking after each other. Basically, you know, just getting back to what we were here for. Rebuilding soils. Our soils have been absolutely destroyed. Even your garden soil is probably not soil, it's clay that they ship in from some quarry somewhere, and they just trash it down and they just put grass seed on it and hope it, you know, it does something. So when you rebuild a soil, I've been doing it 4 years now in that back garden, the soil is about 8 inches deep now. And it's slowly at the bottom, it's being integrated into the clay, where the little critters are taking the compost down into the soil. So it's absolutely beautiful when you start to rebuild your own soil. Your soil is a sign of how healthy you are. And if you grow food in depleted and unhealthy soils, then you are going to be unhealthy. Simple. So how else can we save the world? We can become aware of a closed loop system. And what I mean by closed loop is this: reduce, reuse, repurpose and recycle. Let's stop throwing away our resources. Let's stop putting them in the bin and let's start using them instead. You can use newspapers, cardboard boxes, egg boxes, old, what else can you use? So there's so many stuff you can use. You can use the tubs and everything's growing, everything I've just shown you before. And the idea of a closed loop sustainable system is that we do not have to keep going to shops to buy what we need. We have it all. We have it all. We just need to start reducing, reusing, repurposing and recycling. And bring up that skill set back home. And this provides a real social activity. It's not just a hobby or a little thing to do on the side. If we've got nothing else to do, or our food security is threatened, then we have real need to get together and grow together. And I mean grow food together and to grow together as people and community and friends. Yeah. When we put more than one mind together, then we have resourcefulness. People start to realize they can do things. It's enabling. We're outside in nature. Getting out in the cold is good. You might not like it when you're tucked up on your sofa, but believe me, it's really good for the immune system. Vitamin B12, you can only get it from the soil unless you're a meat eater. But if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, it's very hard to get B12, but the soil gives you B12. There's lots of ways in which the natural magnetic frequency of this planet feeds your soul. And you probably know about grounding, taking your shoes and socks off and standing on the earth. Yeah, this is like putting ourselves back in rhythm with the earth. There's nothing more powerful than really embracing what earth offers and coming home to what we're about as human beings. And let's, for once in our lives, be a producer and not a consumer. This whole system that is so shot to pieces that we live in is about consuming. And they have absolutely disincentivized being a producer and put you over to being a consumer, whereby young people have no idea how to produce anything except a computer game. Yeah? And we really do need to get our young people learning to be resourceful and producing and taking part in something they can feel proud of, and actually is producing something very valuable for their families and their communities. So this was just a quick look at some stats that I pulled together. So the UK food and drink waste is 9.8 million tonnes, and this is how it's distributed. The biggest waste of food is household. 7 metric tonnes of food goes to waste in households per annum. This is largely because producers are trying to encourage people to buy one, get one free. So what happens is they produce more than they need and they can't sell it. So they fob off the problem on the population who think they're getting a deal by buying one, get one free. Now, I don't throw a great deal of food away. I do throw some, very, very minuscule, but I know some of my neighbours, they keep me in food. I'm not joking, they keep me in food. They throw so much out, I see it on the compost heap and I think that's edible, and I take it off again. Because I encourage them to go and put their waste food on my compost heap. You're going to laugh now, I'm going to tell you a little story. About a month ago, I've got my chickens and they're out the front with me most days, and I sit there with a cup of coffee, just let them roam a bit, because my own garden is quite small. But anyway, I was sat out there one day and this lady came past and she said, "Oh, chickens." She said, "Would you like me to give you my Sunday roast peelings?" And I said, "Oh, yes, please." And she said, "Great, I'll just leave them on the doorstep." That's fantastic. Anyway, she gave me all these peelings and I noticed that she would give me lots of huge, you know, like when you used to peel a potato, some people used a knife and they just peeled half the potato off. Yeah. Well, she gave me all these peelings, and the birds don't eat potatoes. They're not a great fan of potatoes. I've probably, ruined them, spoilt them already with lush greens and whatever else I've given to them. But they don't like potatoes. And one day I gave them everything else but left the potatoes in the bag, stuck them in the sink, give them a good old rinse, all the mud and dirt off the skin, because I knew she gets organic deliveries. And I actually fried them and ate them for dinner. You're going to think, what is she doing? But I did it because I had a house full of food, but I can't bear waste. I can't bear waste. And if it's edible, I'm not going to put it on the compost. I'm going to eat it. So one of my neighbours loves broccoli. The other one loves cauliflower, but they only get through half of it. And then just because it's been in the fridge for a few days, they stick it on the compost heap. And I go and fish it off and say, "My God, that is edible." And I'll go and cook it. Which, why not? So going over to manufacturing, you can see manufacturing is 1.7 metric tonnes. Retail, very little. Hospitality and food service, purple, very little. Food waste in litter, oh, that's just in the bins. And wholesale, very little. So really what's happening is the major producers are producing too much and they're flogging it over to the consumer so that they haven't got the problem. And we are the ones who pick up the tab on that. And a lot of people who don't know how to manage food in their homes do waste a lot of food. Okay, I'm going to go through this quite quickly because I'm aware we're 9 o'clock already. So these are the links that I've made with the community, primary and secondary schools. I've had a young man design the video that I'm going to show you in just a moment. I've had the children down the allotments. I've been in to give them talks on composting. I've been into the GP surgeries to talk about our projects and how they can get their a green prescription for their mental health patients or those rehabilitating from heart conditions or strokes or whatever. Local charities, I've networked with many local charities, children's charities and charities and initiatives to bring other initiatives to life in the town. The careers office, I've spoken to them to see if there's anyone that's looking for volunteer work to skill up on something. Job centre, likewise. Youth clubs and scouts, I've given talks with them. I've shown them how to recycle things. Local businesses and restaurants and builders merchants, these are very well connected. Local business builders merchants, I take all their scrap. Restaurants, you know, I used to sell them lettuce leaves and other products and so on. Local businesses sort of networking, say, gimme, have you got this? And in return, I'll give you some vegetables. And retirement homes, I went and planted up a retirement home, not last year, but the year before. And they absolutely loved it. So this was just a picture of the children on the plots. I think this was year 2, so it would have been 7-year-olds, I think 6 or 7-year-olds. And they were there just kind of picking out weeds. Their instructions were to pick out weeds. I gave them a pot that didn't have any vegetables in, so they could just pick whatever they wanted. And they absolutely loved it. So what I'm going to show you now is a Get Diggin It video. I think we shortly finish after this, but this is a video that was it was done by a 17-year-old at Helena Romani School who needed some work experience working for local business with his video. And he was put forward by his teacher.
Growing your own veg used to be one of the most important ways of getting to eat healthy food. We learned how to grow, cook and preserve, and we shared what we grew, so that we all had food for winter. In our fast-paced, industrialised world, where food crisscrosses the globe daily, we have handed over the responsibility for our nutritional well-being to vast corporations. Where once we grew, now we buy. While some areas starve for food, others starve for nutrients, and meanwhile the waste food mountains grow. Get Diggin It is responding to this crisis of rising food prices and food inequality by inspiring local people to come together again, to grow food and develop resourcefulness, and share what nature provides for free. Get Diggin It is a Durmow, UK-based food-growing community interest company, growing veg in other people's gardens, inspiring the young and old, the well and unwell, the garden haves and have-nots. We are learning to get together and grow food, rebuild soils, and innovate with waste materials. And together we're building a community that is, at last, not all about money. The more people that join the movement, the more food we can grow. The more food we can grow, the more our volunteers and garden owners get their healthy, naturally grown produce for free. And then, to turn the industrial model on its head, only our surplus is sold, not trashed. Get Diggin It creates a forum for people to come together with good ideas and make them into a reality. To run Get Diggin It requires a myriad of skill sets and abilities to be able to deliver the promise of a not-for-profit company that can sustain itself financially while delivering well-being, fitness and healthy homegrown vegetables, and not least of all, a thriving sharing economy and community. Why not make a difference and join us and take part in the food revolution that is Get Diggin It?
So pace lead is a therapy term which is from the world of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. So if you want to convince somebody of a way of doing something, you pace alongside them for a while until they've gained your trust, and then you lead them in the direction that you would like them to go in. So I call it backdoor activism, because people don't realise they're becoming active and doing stuff that's really important. I think now, the people that are joining me now with Get Diggin It are absolutely aware of the imperative of growing our own food. But when I wrote this talk a year and a half ago, it wasn't so obvious what we needed. But the pace-based lead is about sort of pacing alongside somebody and saying, oh, why don't you get involved? This would be great. And then slowly inspiring and encouraging them to actually take up the leader position in community. Work in as many ways as possible with the community for a common goal and not common purpose, because that's a very nefarious charitable organisation, so-called charitable, that's funded by lots of dark entities. So common goal, to work for a common goal, and the common goal being, you know, for us, this is for us, nobody else. It's just for our local community. Be the change we wish to see, be part of the solution, not the problem. Stop consuming, start producing, start networking, start sharing, start growing together. This is how we're going to build our new world. And make ourselves important to the local community. Give free food to volunteers and all who work for the benefit of the project. Tell the rest, which is an Ubuntu model. Ubuntu is a beautiful model of African model of working together. Its kind of popularity at the moment is being spearheaded by a guy called Michael Tellinger. I'd recommend that you go look and find out who he is. I was part of the Ubuntu network for quite some time, and it was really it was disorganized at the time, but at the moment now it's coming into its own. It realizes how important it is. Future plans. Okay, this is probably not so my future plan at the moment, because the way things have changed, personally, I am not prepared to jump through COVID hoops to get any of this moving. So what I'm doing is I am going to close the company, but I'm going to continue with the activities on a totally voluntary community basis with no profit idea and no income idea. This is just, as much as I can, promoting this among people. So market gardening, maybe not now, but certainly seedlings, and maybe not sales, but sharing seedlings, because everyone has always got too much and somebody else hasn't got enough. Let's start seedling swapping. Foraging, woodland walks and meditation, we all do that. We can charge a little bit for it, but really what we're looking at is empowering people, learning how to live off the land. We can teach, we can all do this. This doesn't have to be through Get Diggin It. You all have skills, everyone has skills. I know, Claire, we spoke briefly. You have, everyone's got skills they can share with the world. And there's no reason why we shouldn't start showing them how to do it. All of us are leaders. We are the ones we've been waiting for. It's up to us. It's not up to anyone else to fix this world except us. And talks, permaculture, Kenyan sack gardening, beekeeping, willow weaving, pallet wood crafting. There's so many things we can either teach or learn if we harness the skill set of our local people and get them to show us how to do things, or us show them. And obviously I've done lots of talks and social activities. I've did Christmas walks. I've also written a book, although it's not quite finished, but it really is a journey on why Get Diggin It and how I came across it. So I often call it gardening with benefits, gardening with benefits. So not friendship with benefits. So this is, so this is like some of the stuff you can get in literally so quickly in one season. It's incredible. Get Diggin It. So how to change the world, join the movement. Now I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. So let me stop the share. Let me just, I don't know if you want to open your channels and ask questions, and I'll just go and quickly look for the video link, and you can let me know what you think.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. Yeah, a lot of information to take on there. But yeah, I mean, so how do you go about, like, what's the next step? I've got quite a big garden space that I really don't utilise at all. And I keep, buying seeds and thinking this is going to be the year, and then I don't quite get out there. And so what's your sort of suggestion? Is there a model that we can follow, or, that's a bit more?
Well, aside from actually like joining me with my course, we're 2 weeks in. It's my third week tomorrow. There is a way of catching up. It's so early. It's not like you're behind. Okay. You know what I mean? You're not behind. It's still very, very early in the season. So what I would do is there's a person I would follow on YouTube. If you're not following me, follow a person on YouTube called Charles Dowding. And I think his channel is literally just Charles Dowding. And he's a no-dig gardener. And he just shows very simple ways of laying beds, setting it up, super easy, super quick, how to do it, how wide to do it, how high to do it, what to lay it on. He's just amazing. There are lots of people you can follow, but I would recommend Charles Dowding as a number one. He grows in I think Dorset somewhere.
Okay.
So,
But is it something like, so is there a Get Digging model that you're looking to roll out in other people's gardens, or is it that you're just encouraging people to just do their own thing?
I do actually. Since I've been sort of using this initiative that I'm doing lately to teach people, I've actually offered to go into people's gardens and say, look, if you want me to give you some advice, I'll come in. I do charge a little bit for that because obviously, you know, we need to live somehow. But when I say a little bit, I don't mean hundreds of pounds, literally 50, 100 quid max. And what I'll do is I'll do you a plan. I'll tell you how to do it. Okay. Included in that, if you want all the videos that I've taught my classes with and all the resources that I've taught on the class, I'll just send them to you. Right. But there's nothing more liberating, if you like, than just getting out there and doing something. And you know, I talk through how to do that on my classes, and so does Charles Dowding. And Charles Dowding is free. My class is only 30 quid for 6 weeks, but we've already done 2. It's not like you can't catch up, but we have already done 2, but it's up to you.
Will you redo it or not? Is it going to be too late then?
I think what I'm going to do is actually once it's all done, I'm probably going to sell it as a package, but it will be very cheap. I mean, at the moment you're getting 30 quid for 6 lessons. It's 5 quid a lesson. I mean, it's ridiculous, really. But I did it so cheaply because I knew there were so many people wanting to access it, and I don't need to make mega bucks. You know, I could have put it up for 100 quid for 6 weeks, but I don't need. I don't need 30 people paying 100 quid. I don't need it. You know, I'm happy with a couple of hundred, £300-400. That sorts me out for a few weeks, and then I've got, you know, later on I can package it all up and sell the whole course for, I don't know, 20 quid, 15 quid, really cheap, just so that people have got that hand holding.
Yeah, brilliant. I really want to thank you. I'm really interested and inspired by all the work you've done. It's amazing what you're doing.
Thank you.
And I would really like to link up with you more and spend a bit more time at some point, you know, finding out more, because you sound like you're doing some, you know, apart from the Get Digging It, you're even the other side of what you're doing. So I'll leave you with everybody else.